Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about luck in games. I've given a lot of thought to what the role of luck is in games because it's something which people constantly complain about or get excited about in games, and so here we go. Let's see. I should say that a lot of the content is in Characteristics of Game. This is a textbook which we published last year. I've been working on it for quite a while. I've got two co-authors. And in it, what we do is look at the basic characteristics of games and just try to talk about what their impact is on gameplay. Part of the philosophy of this book is that when students get into college, they often have 12 years of education with regard to literature, narrative, character, things like that, but they have very little education, if any, with regard to games. And so what we try to do here is just set up some very basic vocabulary, like what is luck, what is balance. I also want to mention that the games is a very broad category of things, and so it's very difficult to talk inclusively about all of them, and yet I want to include them all. So what I do is often talk about ortho games. An ortho game is what we've defined as being a game which lasts a fixed amount of time and ranks the players. So either into a winner and some losers, or gives them all a score. And so a lot of games are ortho games. Poker is an ortho game. Some of the ones here, Jeopardy, Counter-Strike, almost any card game, basketball, all ortho games. But this isn't all games. There's a lot of games where they don't end up with a ranking for the players. And so if I talk about something being true for games and you're thinking of a game which it doesn't make any sense for, there's a good chance that you're thinking of a non-ortho game like Dungeons and Dragons. And then what I'm saying may apply to that, but you might have to be creative, or it might just not apply. So, first of all, we're going to start talking about what luck is in games. So, and what I want to begin with is this idea of luck versus skill, because frequently this is the way people talk about luck in games. They say there's not enough luck, there's too much skill, or there's not enough skill, but there's too much luck. And I believe that's a false dichotomy, that you can have games with a lot of luck and a lot of skill, and you can have games with very little luck and very little skill. So oftentimes, in order to demonstrate ideas or explore a concept, what I like to do is come up with toy games. A toy game is a game which is constructed to make a point, but it's not a game which you would want to play because they tend not to be fun. Rando Tests is very much not fun. But it demonstrates this idea that there can be lots of luck and skill in a game. So with Rando Chess, the way you do it is you play standard chess, but afterwards you roll a die. And if you roll a 1, the loser wins and the winner loses. So Rando Chess, in some intuitive sense, has just as much skill as chess. That is, all the books that are printed are relevant to Rando Chess, and all the study you do is as relevant to Rando Chess as it is to regular chess, but at the same time, there's obviously more luck. So that demonstrates, I think, a game which has just as much skill as chess, but more luck. And so here's another toy game, and this one is also not fun to play. This one is called Pick a Number, and what happens is players simultaneously show their hand, and whoever shows more fingers wins. 3. So this game doesn't have much skill, because once you, because it's very easy to get to the final state of the game, the best play, which is to show 5 every time. So you got to draw each time. So there's not much skill, and there's not much luck, unless one player has more fingers than the other. So thinking about luck and skill in this way, I like to think of them as being on a graph. And you can see here that you might put bingo in the area with low skill, no skill, and high luck. Tic-tac-toe doesn't have too much skill and doesn't have too much luck. Go has a lot of skill and not much luck, and poker has a lot of skill and a lot of luck. So, what is luck then? There's a lot of different ways which luck is introduced into a game. One is overt randomness, and this is usually what we think about when we think about luck in games. Dice, cards, random number generators, very important part of computer games. But luck is also introduced by game theory and politics. Simultaneous hidden actions can introduce luck. A lot of people play rock, paper, scissors and feel there is no luck or feel that it is all luck, and really it's somewhere in between. Other players introduce randomness. And then there's also physical limitations. Memory can introduce luck. You might be pretty sure this card is the one you're after, but you're not 100% sure. That is luck. The better your memory, the better your chances of recalling exactly which card it is you're looking for. Accuracy, speed, strength, all these things have some degree of luck to them. And complexity, and this is probably what people often have the hardest time as accepting there being luck. But to illustrate that complexity has some luck to it, if a person has to choose between 2 doors, one of which leads to victory and the other to defeat, you don't have any problem as seeing as this being a contest of luck. But if these doors were complexity beyond our understanding, why would it be less luck? If you just can't figure out which of these calculations is the correct one and end up choosing randomly, that's luck also. So that brings us to toy game number 3. This is probably more fun than the other 2. This one is guess a digit of pi. So 2 players are given a big number, like in this case 50,347,200. And they each have 30 seconds to determine what that digit of pi is. So 30 seconds isn't very long. They both come up with a number. And one of them wins and one of them loses, or maybe both lose. In this case, the answer is 7. And I doubt it really is 7. I probably just put down a string of random numbers here. But this game, it's not hard to see in practice, has a lot of luck. But this is just a calculation, so it's just like playing chess. You can't see the end. You make your best guess. And in a lot of ways, this behaves just like you might imagine a game like chess to be, where you might come up with theories that tell you that there's more 7s in that region of pi than not, and so it increases your chances. But it won't increase them to 100%, or you might even solve it and figure it out completely. But then, of course, if you move further down, you probably won't have the correct solution for all the digits of pi. And so this leads us to understand that there is actually luck in a game like chess. And I here assert that I could defeat Kasparov by playing randomly. And that's pretty clear. If Kasparov can be beaten by moving randomly, I could stumble upon the game which beats him. I made an estimate as to what the chances of that would be, and I think I've got a better chance of winning the New York State Lottery 15 times in a row. So there's not a lot of luck to my contest with Kasparov, but there might be a little. So that brings me to how I define luck, which is uncertainty in outcome. It's a very utilitarian definition of luck. If you don't have a constant outcome, then there's some uncertainty. Then there's some if there's some variance in how the game will turn out, then there's luck involved. This definition is likely to have some counterintuitive repercussions, and that's because humans are really bad at identifying what true randomness is. They always try to find order in randomness. And there's an exercise which is often given to demonstrate how bad people are at understanding randomness. And that exercise is to have your student write down 100 results for heads, tails, for flipping a coin. You pretend they flip a coin 100 times and write down the results, and then really flip a coin 100 times and write down the results. And almost always, you can, until somebody's pretty educated with this, you can tell which one is fake, which one is the manufactured random list, and which one is the genuine list of heads, tails. Because I was curious, I gave this test to my son, and he failed. You can conquer it, though. I gave this test to my daughter, and when she was 4, I created a game to train her to bluff, because I could play almost any game with her, but I couldn't play games where she had to lie. And the game was, she held a coin in her hand, and she told me which one it was in, and she was trying to fool me. And I would always beat her. But at some point, she started to win. And then in time, she sort of became like a hit girl for her games. And she actually passed. I still suspect she might have cheated. So, how should we as game designers use luck in games? This is worth thinking about because historically we've got millennia of experience making games, but we've got very little experience with the professional designer. Most games historically evolved. And there's natural forces on your game design which push it towards reducing the amount of luck. Over time, the more serious you play, the more the serious players want to see their skill be in the spotlight rather than their luck. Examples of this are early versions of chess actually did involve dice. That's chaturanga there, and you can also see luck being reduced in games like backgammon by the introduction of the doubling cube. And in a game like bridge, you see the reduction of luck over time because they start making duplicate bridge where everybody gets the same hands, for example. And you see luck being reduced in a game like Magic, where originally there was no mulligan rule, for example. If you got a bad hand at the beginning of a Magic game, that just counted as your defeat. But later on, there were rules that if you got a bad enough hand, you could throw it away and get a new starter hand because that first hand you got was so important. It's often difficult to add luck to an existing game because your most entrenched audience will see that as reducing the effect of their skill. So once your game is mature, you may have trouble adding luck. It trivializes the experience, the expertise of the expert players. And they want to win all the time, not just some of the time. So when you have a game which has low luck, players can often get caught in strategic ruts, and then you get a lot of the same One of the reasons you want to add luck to your games, or you might consider adding luck to your games, is because it can increase the variety in your game. In a game like chess, for example, if you start playing a lot, you can get caught in strategic ruts. And what will happen then is the more you play, the more you have to rely on opening books and rote play to get to the interesting part, which will be 20 moves into the game. When you have more luck in the game, then there'll often be stranger situations that will appear, which will make it so that that players have to explore a new part of the game space, which otherwise might not open up to them. I like to divide players into different categories. Two of the categories I like to think about are innovation and honing. Innovators are players who play games and they like to explore the new strategies. So they like to learn new games and they like to explore the big strategic ideas of the game. So in chess, they might get excited by the idea that you get to protect pieces, that you and figure out how to combine your pieces into making threats. But after a little while, the innovator has more and more of a difficult time innovating, and the honer takes over. The honer is the person who likes to play with the percentages and really study the opening moves and memorize word lists in Scrabble and percentages in poker. High luck games have a better chance of satisfying the innovator for longer because they look for these novel situations, and over time it will still be most games are still over time owned by the honer, but it'll take more time for it to get to that state. Another two personality types you might see in gameplay. These are passive personality types. Honer and innovator are both active. Passive are the watcher and the flow seeker. The watchers like to watch things happen. So they play the game, they're not necessarily trying to get better at the game, and they're watching stuff happen. If in their game they've got a big red button to push, and it does something crazy, they will be the ones to push it, even if it's not to their advantage. There's that big red button. And so a game like craps, for example, might appeal to them, whereas it may not appeal to the innovator or owner. They like to see the random display, the random parade of outcomes that comes with a game like craps. And a game like innovation, which has plenty of skill and luck, is also appealing to the watcher because you can just sit back and watch and all sorts of crazy stuff happens. So a game can increase, variety can be, luck can increase the variety in your game by things like setup also. In a game like Dominion, the random setup will change the game each time. So an example of how this might be applied to an actual game, in a real-time strategy game, if you have randomized prices or technologies, without it, it might be correct, and players it might be correct to always buy tanks. And it doesn't actually even matter whether this is always the correct move. If players believe it is, and it works well enough, the game may be boring because everybody's doing that. But then the game will stagnate. And if you have randomized prices, then you might see that occasionally it's correct to buy a dragon, and even the player who's most thoroughly caught in a rut will explore some other strategy. It's interesting to note that even an expert like Bobby Fischer, who was thoroughly entrenched as an expert in chess, recognized this lack of variety to be a problem. The part of the game which he loved, innovating, was more and more lost as he got better in the game, and as players just had to memorize opening lines. And so he proposed a random method of chess, which was that you begin out with the back row randomized but symmetric, so it's the same random setup, and with that there's something like 9,000 or 10,000 different games, and it throws opening books completely out of the game, out the window. So another reason to add luck is that luck can protect egos. Losing a game can be painful. And if you think you got unlucky, it may be more of a comfortable thought than thinking you were too slow or weak or just too stupid. Ideally, players who do well will think it's because of their own actions, but those who did poorly will think it's because of their luck. But as you become more mature, you'll understand when you got lucky and when you didn't. So another reason to have luck in your game is that it broadens audiences. In a game with a low luck, it's very difficult. It can be very difficult to find an appropriately skilled opponent. Most people will be either too easy or too hard, and finding the person who is your ideal opponent can be difficult. Computers can help a lot with the matching, which you need, but that may not be enough, because just because you can be matched with somebody doesn't mean you want to play with them. Players want to play with people based on more criteria than just how good they are. They want to play with their friends and family. Will your girlfriend want to play Call of Duty? They may, but there's a great chance they'll play Mario Kart or Settlers of Catan or Super Smash Brothers or poker. Games with low luck often with low luck games, players who have invested different amounts of time will have trouble playing together. So I've given here 3 reasons why you might consider bumping up the luck in your game to increase variety, to make it so that it matches, that you can play with a broader range of players, and because it might protect your players' egos. But there is an argument also that perhaps luck should be reduced over time, because as you get to be a more mature game player, you need that crutch for your ego less. As players become more educated, there'll be more people of an appropriate skill level. But you should keep in mind that as you reduce this luck, you might have trouble expanding your audience, because your new players might have a hard time jumping into the game. And I want to close with a little story of how this way of thinking about luck has actually affected real games. I published an article in the Computer Game Developers magazine, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that, which covered a lot of what I just talked about. And one of my friends who was working at Valve was working on Team Fortress 2, which is an excellent game, and they thought that this idea of adding luck to the game might be what they need, because first-person shooters were in this rut which I was talking about, where it was very difficult for new players to feel like they could participate. And so what they did was they added a critical hit system, and the critical hit system made it much swingier, because when I shot you and shot you and shot you, you might not die, and then you turn around and shoot me and I might die. So there's luck added to the game. Now, they didn't at first tell people what they had done. There was no critical that would splash on the screen. But they said over the next couple of weeks, players came to them and their playtesters came to them and said, "I don't know what you've done to the game, but it is a hell of a lot more fun." And so they were completely sold on this idea after that. Then, of course, when they started highlighting the critical hits, the more experienced first-person shooter players often would complain that there was too much luck in the game, but they knew that for the broad audience, this was making the game more fun. Now, in the last few years, they've done what I talked about, which was they've started reducing the amount of luck. They've, in a lot of different ways, they've made the critical hits less swingy, harder, easier to control. And I asked them whether they were backing off because they thought it was a failure and that they needed to put less luck in the game. And they said, no, this is exactly what you've talked about, which was that over time you need luck less, because your audience is more mature, they need the crutch less, the people are closer to one another in skill level, and they want to see their skills highlighted more rather than the random swinginess. So they consider that a successful application of luck to the game, and there you go. And I think that's everything. So.
Okay, I think we're going to have 10-15 minutes of questions. I have a microphone that I'm going to try to get to work as well, which good luck with that. I think it's this. Can you hear? No? Yes, sure. There we go. So if anyone has a question, you raise your hand and we can bring the microphone over there.
Good morning. As a new game developer, would you recommend that I make my game more locked in?
Thank you.
Would you recommend that I make my first game more luck-based or more skill-based?
I think it'll depend a lot on what sort of audience you're reaching for. If you're designing a Puerto Rico, which is sort of made to appeal to people who like low luck games, then it may not be appropriate to add more luck. But it is hard to remove luck from your game. It is hard to add luck to your game and satisfy your audience. So I would begin out by putting luck in and seeing how that plays, and then over time removing the luck to satisfy your audience. But you should keep in mind that as your audience becomes more and more expertise, to also have beginners play the game and see if you're making it less fun for them. Because if you intend to appeal to this broader group of players, you may be inadvertently just narrowing your game over time as you develop it, rather than making it better.
Thank you.
Hi. Wondering about luck and as it reflects to the number of trials you have in the game. Say you roll the dice once, it will be very lucky who wins. But if you have a lot of dice rolls, it will have regression to the mean. So do you have any kind of thoughts about how that could be used and how many amount of trials you should want to include if you don't want your game to be entirely luck-based?
Yeah, I like to look for sort of luck bottlenecks in a game, because if there's often something that goes on once or twice that has a great impact on the game, and then try to make it so that the randomness there is reduced, or it can be reduced in two ways, in a number of ways. One is by increasing the amount of times that happens, because then you'll have, as you said, the regression to the mean. But an example of that is often like the first hand has a very big impact, or who goes first has an impact, which is often decided by a coin toss. One technique that's really useful is to try to make your game short, or make to make your game short, because then you can replay. You can play both sides going first and going second, and so you might have a lot of luck in a particular one of your games, but then if I play a game and I lose because of luck in 10 minutes, and then I get to play 2 more games and I feel like my skill shown, this might be a good experience. So making your game short, and as you said, increasing the number of times those trials come out so that they sort of cancel out.
Hello. About Magic the Gathering, how do you feel about using the mana system as a way of introducing luck, and would you change anything about it?
Sure. In Magic, the distribution you got your mana was a very important something that I definitely thought about as this is a way I want to introduce luck into the game, and that no matter how good your deck is, if you don't draw the right mana, you might end up losing. And so in this way, I envisioned that a person who was not so good could occasionally beat somebody who was good, and that way you would have a broader audience. Now, I will say though that this worked very well in a lot of cases. Like in the middle of a game, if you need particular mana, that worked pretty well. Where it perhaps didn't work so well is at the beginning of the game where you needed specific mana and you would get very frustrated because you couldn't do anything. Then it felt not as good. And so that's why in a game like Magic, there was these rules introduced to allow you to toss in your first hand or your second hand sometimes and get a new one because your first hand wasn't good enough. So that's an example of perhaps I put luck in the game. Part of it worked pretty well, and there were certain circumstances where it didn't work so well.
Yes, could you come with some examples of current games where you think, given their target audience, they've gotten the luck a little bit too much or a little bit too low?
Oh, there you are. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble finding people. Could you repeat that again?
Yeah, so can you give some examples maybe of current games where you think, given their target audience, that they've maybe taken too much luck or too little, or you would change something?
I'm afraid, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think I want to call out any games in particular because any game which is recognizable has an audience, and that audience will say it's perfect. But I will say that that often often when I'm being taught a board game, one of the very first things I look for is where is your overt luck coming from? Because I play with a lot of people who do a lot of calculation, and I don't want to sit there while they think through all the possibilities every turn. And so I want to have some hidden information in my hand, or I want to have some dice rolls or some random chits somewhere, something that's going to screw up their calculations, so they don't, so that I don't have to engage in a complexity tree race with them. I will say that a game that I think there's a lot of opportunity in games like StarCraft, for example. I would say that a game like StarCraft, I've wondered whether StarCraft actually has more skill in it than chess, that there's actually less luck. And you would determine that just by looking at how often the better players beat the less good players. And I think that it might be the case that if I played a good person at StarCraft, that they would beat me 100% of the time, that it would not matter what I did, whereas I would still beat Kasparov, as I said, 1 time in 7 gajillion. And so I don't think StarCraft has made a mistake by making their game so low luck, but I do think there's an opportunity there for a game which is a real-time strategy game which has a broader audience because it's introduced a little luck.
Yeah, okay. You talked about when games progress, you would remove some of the luck in the game to connect more with the mature audience. But what would you suggest if you kind of wanted to have that low barrier of entry to a game? Would you replace the luck with something else, or how would you do if you wanted your more mature game to still have a low barrier of entry?
I would certainly be cautious about removing the luck. Magic is actually a reasonably good example of that. There's a lot of ways which luck has been reduced in Magic over the years, and it's not just the addition of mulligans, but there's been a lot of cards added which increase the number of options to the player, which help fix problems with the decks and things like that. The cards tend to introduce a lot more skill now. I would be cautious because you don't want to lower the barrier of entry, but as your game matures, you do have, your players do come in with more education. So when people start playing Magic now, it's not like back in 1993 when the game was first introduced where they had no clue. They've got lots of friends, lots of books, lots of web articles on how to proceed, and they can ramp up much, much faster than they could in the old days. So while I would be cautious, I would also acknowledge that, I would also be aware that, as your game matures, even the new players can handle more skill in the game.
What was your considerations about luck versus skills in your games, for example, Magic cards and Robo Rally, before you made them? And have they paid off? Did they do something you didn't have imagined at the start?
I don't know. Certainly Magic and Robo Rally were designed before I had begun formally thinking about what luck in games was and what its role was. So I was designing more based on intuition with trial and error. I will say, though, that there were a lot of variations of Magic which people proposed, which I dismissed, like you get to arrange your deck. And one of the reasons was because I wanted to see that variety, which would come from shuffling your deck, and I didn't want to go down that complexity tree, which I get so tired of exploring. So in more recent games, it's a balancing act. I like to make sure that there is variance that's coming from some source. I love using hidden information of cards, but dice is fine. And the balancing act, though, is making sure that it doesn't feel too bad when it doesn't go your way. That you feel like you've got enough control over it, and that takes experience and trial and error, I think.
Since you mentioned StarCraft, I felt I had to ask a question. So in StarCraft, for example, there's a lot of physical limitations to a game, whereas chess has no or less physical limitation, you could say, because you don't have speed or the same sort of, you only have sort of memory and complexity, where in StarCraft you have both this and physical limitation. Do you feel that this is something that you should try to avoid because it will have a huge impact on your audience?
I think it does have a huge impact on your audience. I don't think that means you should avoid it. You should just know what your audience wants. Yeah. There's been a lot of board games recently which have explored flicking and tossing things in a skillful manner, and I think that appeals to some people quite a bit. And that's often a way to introduce luck. If you, even though on the surface of it, throwing a die and having it end up on a particular spot might seem like it's entirely skill. In fact, by my interpretation of skill, which is variance, it has a lot of luck. The closer you can get, or the less bouncy the material is, the less luck it'll have. But it has a very, in some ways, satisfying amount of luck, quality of luck to the players, which is that they feel like they can get better at it. It is, but I think that the comparison of StarCraft to a game like chess is you are comparing something almost across disciplines. But there's luck in games like basketball and StarCraft and chess, and there's different ways to exert your skill. I'm very frustrated often. I loved StarCraft at the beginning, but as I got better, one of the ways I characterized it, this is an aside, was that it felt like I was playing chess while having to juggle, which I didn't like that feeling.
Hi.
Yeah.
A bit in thread with what he just said, but how do you see luck having an effect on the immersion of the players, and how could you use it to affect them?
The immersion of the players. I can hear you.
Okay. More how do you keep the players playing the game totally all the time, getting deeply involved within it by the usage or removal of luck?
Well, I think one of the wonderful things luck does is that it tends to be associated with variety, and that the variety, I'm not sure about immersive, but I do believe that brings people back when they get an unusual situation in a game. They want to play again and see whether it happens again or whether something as crazy can happen. So one of the things I look for in games is there a large variety of game states that you can actually reach, either through players' decisions or through some sort of random event. I can imagine that when you introduce luck in a way that dissatisfies your players, which most often will happen, and this is what people often complain about with luck, is that a lot of players feel very they dismiss luck, and one of the reasons is because what they think of is the 3-hour game they played where they lost it on a die roll, and that can be unimmersive, so to speak. You're in this game, you're in the groove, and suddenly it seems like what you've just spent 3 hours doing is meaningless. And so that's something to consider, is that the longer your game, the more you want to have your luck front-loaded. If the luck is being introduced way in the end, which is of course okay sometimes, but if in general it is, it'll make the first parts less important.
Well, it's out of battery. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions. But I would like to once again, first of all, say thank you very much to Richard Garfield for coming here. And also I would like to thank Thomas Vigild for making this possible. Really, it wouldn't be possible without him. And of course, ITU for letting us use the room. So this was perfect. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.